It was a routine traffic stop until it became a personal nightmare. An officer pulls over a car for swerving. In the trunk, he finds the biggest jackpot of his career, but on the passenger seat, he finds his wife's perfume. In the trunk, lying next to the illicit goods, he finds her favorite silk scarf and the man in handcuffs. He knows the officer's name. This wasn't a random stop. It was a message. A carefully planned setup from a dangerous organization his wife is tangled up with. His entire life is about to unravel, one secret at a time. You do not want to miss a single second of this story. Hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss what happens next. The silence had become a physical weight. Officer Murphy felt it pressing on his chest long after his shift began, a phantom echo of the quiet that had consumed his home. At 38, he understood that life was a series of adjustments, but this new stillness, this cold and measured absence of conversation with the woman he loved, felt less like an adjustment and more like an ending. He drove, his hands steady on the wheel, but his mind was miles away, sorting through the unsaid words from breakfast, the turn of a shoulder at dinner, the empty space in the bed. His patrol car moved through the dark streets, a solitary bubble of mechanical noise. The night was deep, edging toward that final, weary hour before the sun began to poison the darkness. He was tired. It was a bone-deep weariness that had little to do with the double shift he was pulling and everything to do with the feeling of walking on glass in his own house. Then, movement pulled him from his thoughts. Ahead of him, a luxury sedan, sleek and dark, cut sharply across the center line. It corrected itself with a sudden jerk, then drifted again, kissing the opposite lane before snapping back. It was not the clumsy weave of a drunk. It was too precise, too aggressive. It was the movement of someone either entirely distracted or dangerously indifferent. Murphy's focus sharpened. The weight on his chest did not disappear, but it was joined by the familiar, cold rush of adrenaline. He accelerated, the patrol car's engine responding smoothly. He closed the distance and activated the lights. The brilliant flashes of red and blue pulsed against the dark sedan, illuminating its reflective surface. The car took its time pulling over, finally rolling to a stop. Murphy positioned his vehicle, the beam of his spotlight fixing the sedan in a harsh white glare. He sat for a moment, standard procedure, watching for any sudden movements, any sign of trouble. Nothing. Just a car sitting still. He stepped out, the quiet of the night rushing in. His boots made almost no sound on the pavement as he approached the driver's side. He kept his hand loose, near his sidearm, his eyes scanning. The windows were tinted, deeply, making it impossible to see inside. He tapped lightly on the glass with his knuckle. The window slid down with a faint electronic hum. The man inside was young, 25 perhaps. He was smiling, a wide, bright smile that seemed entirely out of place. He was handsome, in a sharp, restless way. "Hello, sir," Murphy began, his voice the neutral tone of authority. "I'm Officer Murphy. The reason I am stopping you is you swerved into oncoming lanes a couple of times back there." The young man's smile faltered, replaced by a mask of exaggerated concern. "Oh man, did I? I am so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. You also cut that last turn very wide, coming into my lane," Murphy continued, his gaze steady. The man's aroma drifted out, an expensive, sharp cologne. "May I see your driver's license and proof of insurance, please?" The performance began. The young man slapped his pockets, a look of theatrical panic crossing his features. "Oh no. You're not going to believe this. I don't got it. I must have. I live right up the street, officer, I swear. My insurance and all that stuff, it's in my other bag. I just live right up the street." Murphy waited. He had heard this story, or versions of it, hundreds of times. But this one felt different. It felt rehearsed. "Everyone around here knows me," the young man added, trying for a confidential tone. "I don't have my registration, but I think I got my insurance." He began to rummage through the glove compartment, his movements quick and jerky, but his eyes kept flicking up to meet Murphy's. He was watching for a reaction. "I'm not from around here, you see," the man chattered, pulling out a handful of scattered papers. "I'm using my map as I'm going. I'm just trying to get to a friend's place. I'm from Chicago." The word hung in the air. Chicago. It was offered up like a piece of identification in itself, a fact meant to explain everything or nothing at all. Just so dark, I can't really see, the man said, gesturing to the tinted windows. I need you to find your insurance, sir, Murphy said. And I need your name. Randy, the man said, his smile returning, though it didn't reach his eyes. It's just Randy. Look, I'm valid, I promise. You can check. I've been down here maybe 5-6 months. Officer Murphy looked at Randy. At 38, he had learned that real nervousness had a specific quality. It was fidgety, avoidant. People who were genuinely scared of a traffic stop wouldn't look him directly in the eye with such calculating intensity. Randy's hands were moving, but his eyes were perfectly still, assessing. The panic was a costume. Underneath it, the man was calm. He was more than calm. He seemed almost to be enjoying himself. Randy, Murphy repeated, and you have no government-issued identification on you at all. No, sir. Like I said, I left it. Honest mistake. Murphy felt the last remnants of his personal fatigue burn away, replaced by a sharp, clear focus. The stop was wrong. The driver was wrong. The swerving hadn't been a mistake, and the nervousness was a lie. This 25-year-old man, with his expensive cologne and practiced smile, was playing a game. And as Murphy stood there, the cold silence of his own home felt a million miles away, replaced by the humming, dangerous energy radiating from the man in the driver's seat. All right, Mr. Randy, Murphy said, his voice hardening just enough to signal a change. Why don't you do me a favor and step out of the car for me? The smile on Randy's face tightened, just for a fraction of a second. The performance had just entered its second act. For what? We're going to have a conversation out here, Murphy said. The air between them was suddenly thick with unspoken challenges. The routine stop was over. Something else had just begun. Randy's smile did not disappear, but it changed. The fabricated, nervous energy was gone, and what replaced it was something much colder, something razor-sharp and assessing. It was the look of a man who had just been presented with a minor, irritating puzzle he now had to solve. For what? He asked again, and this time there was no hint of apology in his voice, only a flat, metallic challenge. Officer Murphy felt the shift. This was not the posture of a man worried about a traffic ticket. This was the posture of a man who felt he was in charge. I need you to roll down this back window for me, Murphy said, his voice a calm, procedural monotone. He tapped the heavily tinted glass with his knuckle. This tint is well beyond the legal limit. I can't see into your car. Randy let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a bark. He made no move to comply. Why I got to roll it down for you for? Ain't nobody back there. It's just me. You see me? I see you? We're cool. I just want to make sure there is no one in the back seat, Murphy repeated, his patience, already worn thin by the long, silent night and the heavier, colder silence at home, beginning to fray. It is a lawful order. A lawful order for a window. Randy scoffed, leaning back in the plush leather seat and king on his throne. He seemed to be enjoying this small, petty dance of authority. He was testing Murphy, pushing against the boundaries just to see if they would bend. Murphy had seen this 100 times. It was a performance. It was a test of will. And at 38 years old, with the weight of a failing marriage on his shoulders, he was in no mood to play. I am not going to ask you again, sir. Step out of the vehicle. There was a beat of silence. Randy's eyes locked on Murphy's, searching for a flicker of doubt, a moment of hesitation. He found none. There was only a cold, tired resolve. With a dramatic sigh, as if he was being subjected to the greatest injustice of his life, Randy pushed the driver's door open. The interior dome light clicked on, illuminating him in a soft, expensive glow. He swung his legs out and stood up, a fluid, confident motion that was almost arrogant. He was taller than Murphy had expected, and he carried himself with a coiled, restless grace. All right, man. I'm stepping out. See? He held his hands up in a gesture of mock surrender. No big deal. Just me. You're wasting both our time, officer. I told you I'm just lost. Murphy ignored the chatter. He guided Randy, who was still talking, toward the rear of the vehicle. Stay right here for me. Keep your hands where I can see them. I'm not going anywhere, man, Randy said, that smile returning. We're cool. Murphy was not listening. His training had taken over, a cold and necessary autopilot. The driver was out of the car. The next step was to visually clear the area the driver had just vacated. He turned back to the open door, his flashlight cutting through the interior. His gaze swept the cabin, the driver's seat, the floorboard, the steering column, then the passenger seat. And his breath caught. There, lying on its side, gleaming in the white beam of his light, was a bottle. It was not a beer. It was a dark, heavy-bottomed bottle of expensive liquor, a brand he knew cost a small fortune. The cap was off, sitting right beside it on the black leather, as if it had been placed there. A rush of pure, clinical adrenaline hit him. This is it. This was the legal key. This was open container in plain view. This was the indisputable probable cause he needed. It was almost too easy, too convenient. It was a gift. Randy leaned, trying to see what the officer was looking at. His tone was dismissive. "Oh, that. Come on, man. That's not even mine. I'm just holding it for a friend. I wasn't drinking it. You can't seriously be hassling me for that." "Holding it for a friend," Murphy repeated, the words flat and dead. It was the oldest, most tired excuse in the book. It did not matter. The law was now firmly, undeniably on his side. He had the pretext for a full search. He leaned in, his gaze still on the bottle, preparing to recite the legal warning. But as he leaned, he was hit by a scent. It was not just the sharp, sour tang of the spilled liquor. It was not just the bite of Randy's expensive, sharp cologne. It was a third scent. It was a perfume. A perfume that was hiding beneath the others, clinging to the upholstery, woven into the very fabric of the passenger seat. The world stopped. It was not just any perfume. It was floral, with a deep, warm, almost impossibly complex note of vanilla and sandalwood. His blood turned to ice. He knew this scent. He knew it as well as he knew his own name. He wasn't on the side of a dark road. He was in his own bedroom. It was Christmas, 2 years ago. He was watching Sarah open the small, square box wrapped in blue velvet. He remembered the tiny, crystal-faceted bottle. He remembered her gasp, the way she dabbed it behind her ears. "It's perfect," she had whispered. "I'll only wear it for you." On our special nights, the memory was so vivid, so full of warmth and love, that its presence here, in this stranger's car, mixed with the smell of spilled liquor, felt like a physical blow, a sacrilege that made him sick to his stomach. The coldness at home, the long silences, the headaches, the late nights at work. He saw her, just last night, walking out the door. "Dinner with my sister," she had said, not meeting his eyes. "Don't wait up." The quick, dismissive peck on his cheek. She had been wearing it. He hadn't registered it then, in his own fatigue, but he registered it now. The scent had been on her skin. She was not with her sister. She was here. She had been sitting in this seat. The open bottle on the leather was no longer a piece of evidence. It was an insult. The swerving on the road was not a mistake. It was a taunt. The 38-year-old patrolman, the veteran officer, disappeared. In his place stood a husband, hollowed out and shaking with a cold, quiet rage. The open container was no longer just his probable cause, it was his permission. It was the legal justification he would use to tear this car and this man's life apart to find the truth. He looked back at Randy. The 25-year-old from Chicago was watching him, that calculating smile still in place. He was waiting. Murphy's voice, when it finally came, was almost unrecognizable. It was a low, cold thing, devoid of all emotion. "Mr. Randy," he said, the name feeling like poison on his tongue. "Because of that open container, I now have probable cause to search your entire vehicle for other open containers." He did not wait for a reply. He put his hand on Randy's arm, his grip not professional, but a vice. "Hey, man." Randy's confidence finally broke, a flicker of genuine alarm in his eyes as he felt the sheer, personal force in the officer's grip. "That's not. You don't have to do all that. Turn around. I am placing you in handcuffs for my safety and yours during this search. That's cool, right?" It was not a question. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place. The stop was no longer about traffic. It was about the perfume. It was about the lie. And it was just beginning. Randy's body tensed. "Hey, watch what you're doing, man. You can't just..." Officer Murphy's movements were an exercise in brutal efficiency. His training took over, a cold mechanism moving his limbs. "Turn around. Place your hands behind your back, palms together. "This is ridiculous," Randy snapped, but he turned, his confidence punctured by this sudden shift in power. The metallic click of the handcuffs closing echoed in the quiet. The sound was final. "All this for a bottle. You must be a rookie, man. You must be trying to meet a quota." Murphy ignored him. "I am going to pat you down for any items that could hurt me," he said, his voice a monotone. His hands began the search, starting at the shoulders, moving down the arms, checking the waistband. His mind was a storm, but his hands were steady. He was an officer of the law. He was also a husband whose world had just tilted off its axis. He was searching for weapons, but he was also bracing himself for whatever else he might find. His hand brushed against Randy's pants pocket. He stopped. There was a hard, dense object inside. "What's this in your pocket?" Randy, cuffed and pressed against the side of his own car, tried to look over his shoulder. "I don't know, man." "It feels solid," Murphy said. "Can I reach in there and grab it?" "No." The word was sharp, defiant. Murphy paused. The air crackled. This was a direct challenge. "I am not asking for your permission to reach in. I am checking for a weapon. Do not move." "Let me see it first," Randy insisted, trying to twist. "I'm not going to let you reach in there," Murphy said, his voice dropping. "Keep your hands up high on your back." He gripped the fabric and carefully, expertly, pulled the object from the pocket. It was just a set of keys. A heavy, ornate fob attached to several keys. "See?" Randy's voice was slick with relief and mockery. "Probably just some keys." "You're jumpy, officer." Murphy ignored the taunt, his eyes scanning the man. "It was a nice whip, man," Randy said suddenly, his tone shifting to something almost conspiratorial. "You want to drive it so fast." The bizarre offer hung in the air. Murphy said nothing. He had what he needed. The pretext was the bottle. The real reason was the perfume. He guided Randy, who was now chattering again, trying to fill the silence, over to the front of the patrol car. "All right, hey," Murphy said, his voice firm, cutting through the man's words. "I'm going to explain this one more time so you understand. Since there was an open container in plain view, it's going to give me probable cause to search your car for any other open containers." He made sure Randy was secure, standing in the glare of the headlights, visible and away from the sedan. Randy, seeing the search was inevitable, leaned back against the patrol car with a put-upon sigh. "You do your thing, man," he said, the bravado returning. "You do your thing." Murphy turned away from him. He walked back to the open door of the dark sedan. For a moment, he just stood there. The interior of the car was a black hole, waiting. The combined scent of spilled liquor and Sarah's perfume flooded out to meet him. It was a sickening, intimate mix of the forbidden and the familiar. He put one hand on the door, took a breath to steady his reeling senses, and prepared to enter the darkness. He had to know. Officer Murphy began the search, his flashlight cutting a sharp, clinical cone of light into the vehicle's interior. He started with the front passenger side, where the open bottle lay. The perfume was strongest here. It was suffocating. Every breath he took was an intimate betrayal, the scent he associated with love now mixed with the sour tang of liquor and the cold leather of a stranger's car. He forced his mind to focus, to follow the procedure. He was searching for other open containers. That was the job. That was the pretext. That was the only thing holding his spiraling thoughts in check. He ran his hand under the passenger seat. Nothing but wires and springs. He checked the side pocket of the door. Empty. He turned his attention to the glove compartment. He pressed the latch, and the small door dropped open with a soft, expensive-sounding click. His light flooded the small space. It held only a thin owner's manual and a folded insurance slip that did not bear Randy's name. No bottles, no weapons, nothing. For a moment, a strange, hollow disappointment hit him. He was almost hoping for something definitive, something that would make this make sense. He was finding nothing, and yet the perfume told him he was surrounded by everything. He pulled back, about to move to the rear seats, when his light beam grazed the floor mat. Something small, pale, and iridescent caught the light. It was not a bottle. It was not a weapon. His movements became slow, deliberate. He crouched, his knee pressing into the plush carpeting. The smell of her was overwhelming, as if she were kneeling there with him. He reached down, his gloved fingers closing around the object. He brought it up into the white beam of his flashlight. His breath stopped. The air in his lungs turned to ice. It was a hair clip. A single, elegant clip, inlaid with a row of small, lustrous pearls. He knew it. He had seen it just 2 days ago. He remembered it distinctly because Sarah had held it up, smiling, and he had commented on the price. "It's for special occasions," she had said, her voice light. He had seen it on her dresser that very morning, before he left for his shift. Or had he? He tried to rebuild the image of her dresser in his mind, but all he could see was this clip, lying in the palm of his hand. The lie. The lie about dinner with her sister, the cold shoulder, the perfume. And now, this tiny, perfect, damning piece of evidence. She had been in this car, she had been in this seat. The scent was not a lingering trace from a brief encounter. It was the deep, settled fragrance of a passenger. A wave of physical sickness washed over him, a cold dread that started in his stomach and spread to his fingertips. He felt hollowed out. "You finding anything good in there, officer?" Randy's voice, full of that slick, mocking confidence, cut through the fog. The sound came from far away, from another world. Murphy did not turn. He did not react. He closed his hand, the small, pearled clip digging into his glove. He straightened up, his back to the man in handcuffs. He took one, deep, steadying breath, pulling the scent of his wife and this stranger deep into his lungs. He held it for a second, then let it out, the cold night air doing nothing to clear his head. His heart had not sunk, it had been ripped out. He stood for a moment longer, a statue in the flashing red and blue lights. Then, with a focus that was now terrifying in its intensity, he moved toward the rear of the car. He had a job to do, and he needed to see what was in the trunk. The pearl hair clip felt like a jagged stone in Officer Murphy's pocket. Every step he took toward the rear of the sedan was heavy, disconnected. He was moving through a nightmare. The flashing red and blue lights seemed distant, unreal. His focus was a pinpoint, trapped in the cold, sick realization of what that clip represented. His home was a lie. His marriage was a lie. He reached the back of the car. He needed to open the trunk. His search for open containers was the legal justification, but now it was a personal imperative. He had to see what else this car, this man, held. He needed to know the full scope of the abyss that had just opened up at his feet. He had the keys. The ones he had taken from Randy's pocket. He walked back to the front of his patrol car, where Randy stood, illuminated, cuffed, and still wearing that infuriating smirk. The young man was watching him with bright, assessing eyes. "What's the matter, officer?" Randy called out, his voice rich with false concern. "You didn't find any more little bottles, did you?" "I told you, I'm just holding that for a friend." Murphy did not answer. He did not look at the man's face. He raised the key fob, his thumb finding the button for the trunk. He pressed it. A sharp, mechanical pop broke the night silence as the trunk latch released. Randy laughed, a genuine, appreciative sound. "That's a cool pop, ain't it? I love that sound. Always works." Murphy turned his back on him and walked the few paces back to the trunk. He placed his hand on the lid. For a fraction of a second, he hesitated. He was no longer a 38-year-old patrolman on a routine stop. He was a man about to open a door he could never close. He was pulling at the thread that he knew would unravel his entire life. He lifted the lid. The first thing that hit him was the smell. It was not Sarah's perfume. That scent was gone, blasted away by a chemical odor so potent it made his eyes water. It was sharp, acidic, and industrial, a smell that bypassed all thought and screamed one word directly into his brain: contraband. He aimed his flashlight into the compartment. His mind, already reeling, stalled. It simply could not process the scale of what he was seeing. The trunk was full. It was not full of luggage or groceries or a spare tire. It was full of packages. Neat, dense, tightly wrapped bricks of white powder stacked like inventory in a warehouse. There were small bags, large bags, and vacuum-sealed bricks. It was a sea of illicit material. "Oh boys," he breathed, the words barely audible. "Oh boys." This was not a bust, this was a seizure. This was not a handful of pills or a baggie of product for a party. This was distribution. This was a massive quantity. He was looking at a fortune. He was looking at years, decades, of prison time. The professional part of his brain, the part that had been dormant and numb, roared to life with a jolt of pure adrenaline. Jackpot. This was the kind of find that detectives built careers on. This was a major artery, severed. His light moved, scanning past the packages. There was more. Beside the bricks, he saw boxes, ammunition boxes, and something else, heavy and dark. The betrayal, the bust, the lies, the packages, the perfume, the pearls. The two realities, his personal hell and his professional duty, had just collided with the force of a train wreck. The man in handcuffs, the man who smelled of his wife, was not just an unfaithful partner's secret. He was a major trafficker. And suddenly, the swerving on the road made a different, more sinister kind of sense. The fake nervousness, the confidence. The man was not worried about a traffic ticket. He was transporting a mobile pharmacy. Murphy took his time. He let his light linger on the packages. He let the chemical smell burn into his memory. He had to be calm. He had to be methodical. He could not let the man by the patrol car see the shock. He could not let him see the personal ruin. He slowly, gently lowered the trunk lid, the latch clicking shut with a soft, final sound. He stood for a second in the flashing lights, the world silent again except for the hum of his own engine. He had found more than an open container. He had found the end of his life as he knew it. Officer Murphy's hand rested on the now closed trunk lid. His palm was flat against the cold metal, but he felt nothing. He was numb. The image of the stacked packages was burned into his mind, a fortress of white bricks. It was the discovery of a lifetime. It was a career-making arrest, and it meant absolutely nothing. The pearl hair clip in his pocket felt like it was absorbing all the heat from his body. It was a small, cold point of impossible truth. Sarah. He had to look again. He could not reconcile the two realities. The woman who slept in his bed, the woman whose perfume was on the passenger seat, and this mountain of contraband. The two images would not fit together. His mind refused to join them. He told himself he needed to be thorough. He told himself he was just doing his job, cataloging the contents for his report. It was a necessary lie to keep his legs from buckling. He pressed the release on the key fob again. The pop of the latch was louder this time, a gunshot in the frozen silence of his thoughts. He lifted the lid. The chemical smell, now familiar, washed over him. But this time he was ready for it. His light found the packages again. He needed to see what was underneath. He had to know the full depth of it. "I am just going to detain you," he called out to Randy, his voice sounding strange and distant to his own ears. "Just stay where you are." "Whatever you say, boss," Randy's voice floated back, unconcerned. Murphy reached into the trunk. His gloved hand pushed aside one of the larger, vacuum-sealed bricks. It was heavier than he expected. Cold. Beneath it, his light found something else. It was not another package. It was dark, oiled, and metallic. A heavy, dangerous-looking tool, compact and brutal. It was a weapon, and its presence next to the packages changed the entire calculus of the stop. This was not just transport, this was armed. This was a different level of danger. His light moved from the cold steel to the object resting beside it. It was a splash of color. A deep, rich, impossible crimson. He froze. His hand, which had been steady as he touched the weapon, now trembled. He knew that color. He knew that specific shade of red, the one that looked almost black until the light hit it. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, he reached past the steel. His fingers brushed against the fabric. It was silk. He pulled it out. The trunk's interior light, dim as it was, caught the fabric, and it bloomed in his hand. A silk scarf, deep crimson, with a delicate embroidered edge that he had traced with his own finger 100 times. He had given this to her. Their last anniversary. She had laughed, said it was too expensive, and then worn it for the rest of the evening. It was her favorite. She wore it when she wanted to feel beautiful. She had claimed she couldn't find it just last week, had torn their closet apart looking for it. And here it was. Lying in the trunk of a trafficker's car, nestled between a fortune in illicit substances and a heavy weapon. It was coiled there like a sleeping snake. The scent on it was unmistakable. Her perfume. It was saturated with it. The hair clip on the floor could have been a coincidence. A mistake, an item lost. But this was an intimacy. This was a token. This was a deliberate act. He stood there, the red silk draped over his trembling glove, the white packages gleaming in his flashlight beam, the cold steel of the weapon beside them. He was holding the wreckage of his marriage in one hand and the biggest bust of his career in the other. "Hey, Officer Murphy," Randy's voice. It cut through his shock with the precision of a scalpel. Murphy turned slowly, the red scarf still clutched in his hand. Randy was leaning against the patrol car, his cuffed hands behind him. His smile was gone. His face was all sharp angles and calculation in the flashing lights. He was looking directly at Murphy. He was looking directly at the scarf. "You find what you were looking for?" Randy asked, his voice soft, conversational, but carrying perfectly in the night air. "Sometimes you go looking for one thing. You end up finding something else entirely. Something you never wanted to see." The blood drained from Murphy's face. He knew. The man from Chicago, the man with the fake nervousness and the quick smile, knew his name. He had known it all along. This was not a random stop. This was not a coincidence. This was a message. The world compressed to the space between Officer Murphy and the man in handcuffs. The flashing lights, the hum of the engine, the distant city, it all dissolved. There was only the crimson silk in his hand, the name Officer Murphy spoken by this stranger, and the cold, knowing look in Randy's eyes. It was a performance. All of it. The swerving, the faked nervousness, the convenient open container. It was a script, a meticulously staged play, and Murphy had just been handed the final, devastating page. He was not an officer making a random stop. He was the audience, the intended target of this entire production. A white-hot surge of pure, undiluted rage eclipsed the shock. It was so total and so sudden that it stole his breath. The professional calm, the practiced control of a 38-year-old veteran, shattered into 1,000 pieces. This man, this 25-year-old stranger from Chicago, had not just broken the law. He had taken a scalpel to Murphy's life. He had orchestrated this moment. He had placed the scarf. He had placed the clip. He had waited, with that arrogant, knowing smile, for Murphy to find them. The scarf felt like it was burning his glove. He did not drop it. He crushed it in his fist. "You look." Randy began, his voice still soft, still conversational, like maybe you should have just stayed home tonight. That was it. The connection between thought and action vanished. There was no procedure. There was no radio call for backup. There was only the primal, blinding need to erase the smug, calculated look from Randy's face. Murphy moved. He crossed the distance between the trunk and the patrol car in 2 long, predatory strides. Randy saw the change. The shift from stunned victim to avenging fury. His eyes widened, the confidence replaced by a sudden, genuine flash of animal panic. His game had just become real. He did the only thing he could. He twisted, pushing off the hood of the patrol car, and bolted. It was a desperate, foolish move. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He was off balance. He was not trying to escape. He was trying to force a new, chaotic variable into a situation he had just completely lost. He didn't make it 3 steps. Murphy's rage fueled a speed he didn't know he possessed. He did not tackle him. He collided with him. His shoulder struck Randy between the shoulder blades, a full-force impact that drove the air from the younger man's lungs in a pained grunt. They both went down, a tangle of limbs on the cold pavement. The impact was brutal. Randy's head narrowly missed the curb. Murphy was on him instantly, his knee pinning the center of Randy's back, the pressure immense. He grabbed the chain of the handcuffs and yanked hard, pulling Randy's arms up at a painful angle. "Why'd you try to run?" Murphy's voice was a ragged gasp, a low growl that was almost unrecognizable. "Why did you run?" But the question was a lie. It was a placeholder for the real questions screaming in his head. "How do you know my name? What have you done? What did she tell you?" Randy, his face pressed into the grit of the road, sputtered, trying to catch his breath. He was no longer smiling. The mask was gone. But even in pain, even pinned, the defiance was there. "Get off me, man," he choked out. "Don't move." Murphy yelled, the sound echoing in the empty street. He was shaking. His entire body was vibrating with an adrenaline born of pure, personal fury. He had crossed a line. He had assaulted a cuffed suspect. The professional part of his brain was screaming at him, a tiny, distant voice warning him of the catastrophic error he was making. He looked down at the man beneath him, the man who had been in a car that smelled of his wife, the man who had held her favorite scarf. He yanked the cuffs again, harder this time. "Why did you try to run? That was just dumb." Randy gasped, his voice tight with pain. "That was dumb. I'm done, man." Slowly, the red haze in Murphy's vision began to clear. The sound of his own ragged breathing filled his ears. He was on top of a cuffed suspect in the middle of the street, his hands shaking, a trunk full of contraband open to the world, and a crimson silk scarf lying like a pool of blood on the pavement beside it. He had lost control. Completely. He got to his feet, pulling Randy up with a rough, impersonal motion. He shoved him against the side of the patrol car, his face inches from the man's. "You don't move. You don't breathe. Do you understand me?" Randy, gasping, just nodded, his eyes wide and watching. Murphy turned away, his chest heaving. He fumbled for his radio, his hand unsteady. He pressed the button. "Dispatch," he said, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat. "Dispatch. This is Officer Murphy. I have one suspect in custody following a foot pursuit. I need backup at my location." He paused, looking at the open trunk. "You need to send a detective. Send everyone. I have hit the jackpot." The drive to the station was steeped in a heavy, suffocating silence. Officer Murphy drove, his eyes fixed on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The crimson scarf was in an evidence bag, but he could still smell the perfume, he could still feel the silk. His mind was a blank, echoing wall of fury and betrayal. He was too numb to process the sheer volume of the contraband in his trunk. He could only process the scarf. From the back seat, Randy, now secured, finally broke the silence. His voice was no longer panicked or defiant. It was calm. It was casual. It was the voice of a man having a simple conversation. "You know," Randy began, "this town is pretty boring. I've been here 5, maybe 6 months. It's not like Chicago." Murphy said nothing. He kept driving. "In Chicago," Randy continued, his voice taking on a musing quality, "people are alive. They know what they want. Here, everyone seems half asleep. Especially the women." Murphy's grip on the wheel tightened. He felt the muscles in his jaw clench so hard they ached. "They're all just looking for something," Randy said, his voice a soft murmur. "Anything. A little excitement. Something their husbands, their quiet, boring husbands, can't give them. They're so easy to find, they're just waiting." Murphy's vision blurred for a second. He refused to look in the rearview mirror. He knew Randy was watching him. Every word was a poisoned dart, aimed with perfect precision. Randy was not just confessing to a crime, he was describing in intimate detail the destruction of Murphy's life. He was confirming every sickening fear that had solidified in Murphy's mind when he found the pearl clip. "They're careless too," Randy added, almost as an afterthought. "They leave things behind. They think a little excitement is free. It's never free." Murphy pulled into the station's sally port, the brakes grinding. He stopped the car, but for a long moment he did not move. He just sat there, breathing in the sterile air, the sound of Randy's voice echoing in the profound, terrible quiet of his mind. The arrival at the station was a blur of necessary motion. Backup officers, alerted to the scale of the find, were already waiting. The energy was electric. This was a massive bust. Randy was removed from the car, his goofy and rookie comments returning as he was handed over to the booking officers. The trunk was opened and a collective, impressed silence fell over the gathered police as they saw the contents. Murphy moved through it all like a ghost. He handed over the keys, the evidence, the crimson scarf. He spoke in a monotone, detailing the probable cause, the search, the discovery. He did his job. Then, he found a quiet hallway, away from the energized voices and the processing. He pulled out his personal phone. His hand was shaking. He scrolled to her name, Sarah. He pressed the call button and lifted the phone to his ear. The ringtone sounded once, twice. He counted them, each one a hammer blow against his chest. He was praying she would pick up. He was praying for an excuse, a lie, anything other than the truth he was holding. 3 rings. 4. Click. Her voice filled his ear, bright, cheerful, and pre-recorded. "Hi, you've reached Sarah. I can't get to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back." He hung up before the beep. The silence that rushed in was deafening. She was not there. He pressed the button again. This time it did not even ring. It went straight to her voicemail. She had either turned her phone off or she had seen his name and rejected the call. Both possibilities meant the same thing. The woman he had married was gone. The woman he had just heard on the voicemail was a stranger. He leaned against the wall, the phone heavy in his hand, feeling utterly and completely alone. Murphy completed his initial report and walked toward the booking area. He could hear Randy long before he saw him. The younger man was putting on a performance. "I ain't taking my shoes off," Randy was saying, his voice loud, echoing off the tile. "Why you need my shoes? You gonna steal my shoes?" "It's standard procedure, sir. We have to inventory your property," a tired-sounding booking officer replied. "This is goofy," Randy declared, refusing to sit. "Y'all are rookies. This whole place is goofy. I want my phone call. I know my rights. I'm not doing nothing until I get my phone call." Murphy stood and watched from a distance. Randy was no longer the cold, calculating man from the car. He was a caricature of a street punk, defiant and loud over the smallest details. He argued about his belt. He argued about his pockets. He argued about sitting on the bench. It was a strategy. Murphy recognized it. Randy was establishing a record of being uncooperative. He was creating a diversion, painting himself as a low-level, mouthy annoyance. It was an act designed to make the officers impatient, to make them rush, to make them see him as a hassle rather than a serious threat. But Murphy knew better. He had seen the man behind the mask, the man who spoke softly about the boredom of women. The man who had been waiting for him, a man in a rumpled suit, who looked to be about 45, walked into the booking area holding a file. His presence immediately calmed the room. This was Detective Lawrence. He had a quiet, weary authority. He looked at Randy, who was still muttering about his shoes, and then looked at Murphy. "Officer Murphy," Lawrence said, nodding. "That was one hell of a stop." "He was swerving," Murphy said, his voice flat. "He was carrying half of Chicago's supply," Lawrence countered dryly. He turned his attention to the suspect, who had finally quieted down. Lawrence opened the file. "Mr. Randy, you've had a very active evening." Lawrence did not ask questions. He stated facts. His voice was methodical. "What we have, collected from your vehicle, is 6 separate bags of a white, powdery, controlled substance. The total weight is approximately 361 grams. Randy stared at the floor, saying nothing. "We also have $3,100 in cash, bundled. We have 241 rounds of ammunition for 3 different handguns. We have 7 magazines and a high-capacity drum magazine. And we have 1 heavy, metallic weapon in the trunk. That is, by any definition, possession with intent to deliver, plus unlawful possession of a weapon." Lawrence closed the file. "You're going to be interviewed. I suggest you think very carefully about what you want to say." Murphy was in the observation room, standing in the dark, watching through the one-way glass. He needed to see this through. He needed to see the end. Detective Lawrence sat opposite Randy in the small, stark interview room. Lawrence began with the standard questions, but Randy seemed bored. He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "Let's talk about the substances in the trunk," Lawrence said. Randy cut him off. "It's mine." Lawrence paused, surprised by the lack of denial. "What's yours?" "All of it," Randy said. He was not looking at Detective Lawrence. He was staring directly at the dark mirror, directly at the spot where he knew Murphy was standing. "The powder." "It's mine." "The cash." "It's mine." "The weapon?" Lawrence asked, leaning forward. "That's mine too." "I take ownership of all of it," Randy said, his eyes fixed on Murphy. It was not a confession. It was a message. It was a confirmation. Randy was looking through the glass, through the darkness, and speaking directly to Murphy. "Yes, it was all me. I did it. And I know that you know exactly why I'm telling you this." The confession was an act of pure, calculated arrogance, a final twist of the knife. He was pleading guilty to Lawrence, but he was communicating something entirely different to Murphy. It was nearly dawn when Murphy finally walked through his own front door. The house was silent, but it was the same suffocating silence he had left behind hours ago. Sarah was in the kitchen, sitting at the table in her robe, a coffee cup in her hands. She looked up, her eyes wide with a fear she was trying to hide. "You're home," she said, her voice thin. "You're late." Murphy stood in the doorway, the exhaustion and the rage and the profound sorrow making him feel hollow. "Where were you tonight, Sarah?" She flinched, her gaze dropping to her cup. "I told you. I was with my sister. We went to a movie. It ran late." The lie. It was so practiced, so easy. He had hoped, against all evidence, that she would have a different answer. That the scarf, the perfume, the clip were all part of some elaborate, impossible misunderstanding. But the lie sealed it. "Which movie?" he asked, his voice dead. "What?" I don't remember the name. It was just some drama," she stammered. She would not look at him. He walked to the table. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the sealed evidence bag. He placed it on the table between them. Inside, the crimson silk was unmistakable. Sarah looked at the bag. Her hand flew to her mouth, and a small, strangled sound escaped her. All the color, all the life, drained from her face. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with pure, unadulterated panic. He said, she whispered. "You lost this," Murphy said, his voice cracking. "It was in his trunk, with the weapon, with the packages. It smelled just like you." Sarah's face crumbled. The silence that filled the kitchen was the sound of their world ending. Murphy did not sleep. He could not. He sat in his patrol car outside his own house for an hour before driving back to the station. He was a ghost, haunting the edges of his own life. Detective Lawrence found him by the coffee machine. The detective looked grim. "Murphy, I need you in my office." Murphy followed, his boots heavy. Lawrence shut the door. "We ran Randy's full profile. The name he gave us was real, but his history is heavy. He's not just a transporter, he's an armed habitual criminal. He's a major player, connected to a very large, very serious Chicago organization. This bust is bigger than we thought. They're trying to set up operations here." Murphy just nodded, staring at the wall. "But that's not the weird part," Lawrence said, leaning on his desk. "The weird part is you." Murphy looked at him. "Me." "Him," Lawrence clarified. "He's been asking for you, by name. He told his lawyer he wants to talk to the arresting officer. He seems to have a very specific, very personal interest in you. It's not right. It feels personal." "Is there anything at all? You're not telling me, Murphy. Did you know this man before last night?" Murphy had to know. He bypassed procedure. He went to the holding cells. Randy was alone, waiting, as if he knew he was coming. Murphy stood outside the bars. "Why?" It was the only word he could find. Randy got up from the bench. The arrogant smile was back, cold and triumphant. "She told me you were smart," he said. "Why me? Why my wife?" Murphy's voice was a low growl. Randy walked to the bars, his face just inches from Murphy's, separated only by the steel. "She was bored," he whispered. "She told me she was bored. She wanted a more interesting life than the one you gave her. And she was in debt." Murphy's blood ran cold. "What debt?" "The organization I work for," Randy said, his voice full of satisfaction. "We're not just in the powder business. We're in the lending business. Your wife, Sarah, she likes expensive things. Things you can't afford. She borrowed a lot. She owed too much." The pieces slammed into place. The swerving, the stop, the perfume, the scarf, the easy confession. "You wanted me to find you," Murphy whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "I didn't want to be found," Randy corrected him, his smile widening. "I was told to be. The organization doesn't like loose ends. She couldn't pay. They wanted to send a message. To her. And to you. They wanted to show her that her actions have consequences. And they wanted to see what the cop husband would do. The arrest was not an accident. It was a setup. It was a warning. It was leverage." Randy's arrest, the biggest of Murphy's career, was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new, terrifying one. He had just been pulled, personally and professionally, into the same dark world that had already consumed his wife. Thank you for watching this story. We hope you were captivated by the twists and turns of this investigation. We will see you again next time.